Cybersecurity is about more than just technology. It's about how people behave with emails, data, and cloud applications that directly impacts your company's security posture. Security works best when it's ingrained in the culture of your organization. To learn how to build a security culture and transform your employees from targets into a strong line of defense, head to securityweekly.com/proofpoint and visit their Cybersecurity Awareness Center. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/barracuda. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. ExtraHop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feed and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Join us for our next live webcast on November 4th to learn about pragmatic steps to reduce your software supply chain risk. Then join us November 11th to learn the key insights and takeaways from the 2021 OWASP Top 10. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to save your seat. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, gentlemen, articles for the week. We start with the board. We kind of talked about this a little bit on the last segment.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was some insights from a few different organizations around how to approach your board communications and how to be, a little more simplistic and direct. I thought there was a line in here that I thought was very interesting, right? It is the board's job to ask questions, not directly tell CISOs what to do, which I think is a very interesting statement because I think most people expect that they're going to be told what to do.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the lines, one of the statements I pulled out of it was right around that, right around that portion of the article. But we forget we do run a business, right? So you have to make trade-offs and decisions, says one of the SVPs or global CISOs. And for me, it's we got to walk into that boardroom understanding that this board is responsible for running a business. Yes. And we are responsible for identifying risk to the business. So for me, I think that's a core statement that eventually empowers the statement that you just brought out, right? For me, that's the foundational thing. Remember that we're running a business. And if you're a C-level executive reporting to the board, remember their responsibility is to run a business.
And I think it's interesting. We kind of took different points out of this article, but all kind of wrapped around the same thing. So I hit on this question of is the board cyber savvy? And it just made me think that if you haven't been in front of a board a bunch or you haven't had this exposure, I think, Matt, to your point, a lot of people go in thinking like it's the board's job to tell us what to do. That's not really their job, right? Executive staff's job is to figure out what to do. The board is there to advise and comment and kind of make sure they're asking the right questions. And I think that ultimately brings up this question of, you have to, as you move forward in different roles, you have to understand what the other business leader or areas of the business responsibility and true functions are to be really effective at your own job. And I think a lot of people go in thinking like, I'm going to bring a bunch of facts and figures. Well, if they can't be consumed because the board doesn't understand cybersecurity, then it's just a total miss. And I see so many people failing at this because they just functionally don't understand what is the role of the board and what is your role and how do you bridge that gap? And creating that bridge is really what, at a C-level, it should be all about.
That's absolutely dead on, Ben. And it's funny because in the next article, which is the do's and don'ts of advocating for cybersecurity at the board level, The first statement, the first note I took was know your audience, personalities, and the motivations. If you're not building a relationship with the board members, you're missing it. You are absolutely missing it.
So Jason, I'm interested. You bring that up, and that was I was right on that same point. Like, I think a lot of people wonder though, and I'm wondering, like, do you have strategies? Like, how do you do that, right? So, you're the first time CISO, second time CISO, you go into that board meeting and it's like, your interaction is limited at best. And so I think it's key that you figure out how to form those relationships, but it's almost like, you're a guy from Spain, you've traveled to Singapore, nobody speaks the same language, and you're like, how do we interact, right? I mean, it's how do you forge that, right? That's the challenging thing.
For me, Ben, I've always taken that philosophy of no action is still an action, and I'd rather not go through life not actioning things. So you know what I did? I asked my CEO to send out some type of a connector. He ended up sending an email. But ultimately, connect me with the board so I can get to know them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's an ask. And what's the worst thing that could happen? No. You know what I mean?
I think there was a point, I think it may have been in the previous article, but it was in one of the articles, it was asking, like, leaving with the question of, like, what can I do for you? Right? Like that being of service to the board member, like, and I think also the other C-level execs, I think we may have touched on this before, like trying to figure out what you can do for them and having them come away with the feeling that you're being of service, I think really endears you to them.
100%. And again, I've never been afraid to ask. And that's the thing, right? You have to start building those relationships in some way, shape, or form. And for me, it was just introduce me. Right? Introduce me. I'm the first CISO this organization has ever had. Introduce me.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing we have to remember about the board, back to your point, Jason, it's about the business. You got to present business cases, right? I mean, what the board's there to do is make decisions about where you're making investments to move the business forward. And if you put security in a business case context, you're going to have much better alignment with the board than you are, looking at all these don'ts, like don't get technical, don't be too reassuring, right? Don't scare them, because that's not going to work. But if you're there to present business cases about what's going on with security and how it's going to move the business forward, you're going to have a much better relationship as you build that relationship with the board.
Yeah, 100% dead on.
Scaring will work once, right? And then you've lost all credibility when you come back and scare them again, right? So I think, again, ultimately, like, know what your role is and know what their role is. And I think, you're trying to put a balanced perspective that gives them a true assessment of the risk. And then you're trying to have that dialogue to understand where they come out, which side of it, right? Is it too risky, or is it okay? Are they all right with the tolerance? And so I think trying to figure out how to cast that message, again, not being too reassuring and not being scary either, right? It's like, look, this is okay. It's funny because I just came out of an audit committee meeting, right? And like hearing some of the questions, it's like a lot of times, how do I answer that? You're asking like a really wide open question, and yes, I could say no. Neither answer is really correct. It's trying to figure out how to position the reality.
Right. Yeah, and many times it's, articulating what the roadmap is. I've been part of audit meetings like that where findings have come back and, some other executives are really scared. And having the ability to sit down and say, all right, we know what the current state is. We know what that future state outcome should be. Let's look at the gaps and let's start addressing them together and building out that roadmap together. I've always taken that lean process improvement mentality. I did that as an IT leader a long time ago. I said, you know what, my goal as an IT leader is to eliminate non-value add from the business. And I went down the path of lean, right? Learning lean. That has been able to help me in so many different roles, including my CISO role, to sit back and say, current state, we know it. Future state outcome, we know where you need to be. All right, identify the gaps, let's build a plan. Right? And it's looking at it that way that I think is extremely beneficial and helps folks, other business unit leaders, the board, the CEO, realize there's a path. There's a pathway to improve.
And I think that's ultimately what they want to see, right? They want to see vision and strategy. They don't want to see, the sky is falling, right? Like, even if the sky is falling, like, what's your plan to fix it? I think I'm fond of telling my people, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution. And I think that's what they're looking for too, right? Like, have you thought this through, and how are you going to solve the issue, or at least put a plan together to remediate it?
That's right. Our job is not to be the town crier and yell from the rooftops what's wrong, right? Our job is to be solution professionals.
The sky is falling. Yes, thanks. We know that. We hired you to fix the sky, not to tell us about it.
Quick, get out some scaffolding and hold it up. Next article goes back to the people component from the last segment with Renee, right? And this is how to improve the CIO-CISO relationship. But look, this is across the board. I think this is all C-level relationship conversation.
Oh, God,
right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I read this article and I'm like, wait a minute. So it's just like the natural conflict that the sales leadership and the service delivery leadership have, right? Yep, pretty damn similar. I mean, there's yins and yangs in organization. It just happens.
Right, exactly right. I mean, this is a roadmap for a way to build relationships across the executive suite, right?
Right.
Treat them as peers. I mean, it's like, this is not limited to just CIOs and CISOs, right?
Well,
we got to think about this more holistically.
In down level in the article, they talked about, like, if this works, right, maybe you should try it with your people. Like, talk about successful leadership there, right? Yes, don't you like? But I think a lot of people don't understand that, as they move through. Like, you have to empower people.
Yeah,
absolutely. Biggest cybersecurity issue is culture, city CISOs say. Yeah, I think we know this, right? I mean, like, so if
we've never discussed this on here before.
Oh, never.
Here's what I will say, though. This article was focused on government cybersecurity leaders. And holy crap, is there an issue on the public sector side? It's a lot of it is old school culture, right? And old school leadership styles, and the bureaucracy involved in the public sector. I mean, there's just so many different pressures, I guess you could say, right? Coming down on the public sector. They have less funding than anybody in the private sector these days. They're under the microscope from all of the taxpayers. So, if you're a city with 1 million people, you have 1 million people looking at your budget and criticizing it. So it's for me, there's a lot bigger pressure on this side.
Right. I mean, the target has shifted. We've seen that. Like, a bunch of state and local agencies have been targeted in recent history. Right. Yeah. So I mean, they're challenged, as you said, budget. They've typically got people who, because of budgetary constraints, are limited in resourcing. And so it's really hard for them to respond and have, I think, accurate controls in place.
Yeah. And for me, it's one of the most at-risk types of organization, public sector. I mean, think about it. Government agencies, holy crap. We don't want that information getting out there. We don't want them to be compromised. But at the end of the day, this is a yin and yang scenario where you have taxpayers not wanting to fund it. And they need the most help. So how do we as private sector leaders start to influence that? And you guys know already that my community service roots are through the roof, and I try to get involved in K through 12 and get involved in the government side with our state government. And it's a struggle and it's an uphill battle, but we have to evangelize for this because it's much, much needed.
I think there's got to be some ways to think outside of the box on this public-private partnership. You often see companies getting these tax incentives to be in the local area. I mean, you want some tax incentives? Great. Like, how about you work with the public side to help out improve cyber posture? Right. I mean,
we'll give you a tax break with a little skin in the game. Yeah. I love it.
Jason, the week you were out, we had Lee Neely on because we went into some of the federal challenges around the zero trust mandate, right? Because there is a mandate, but there's no budget, right? These public companies that face this all the time. So you've got challenges around budget and timelines and resources, and it just piles up when you get down to the state and local levels. It's even worse than at the federal levels.
Oh yeah, it snowballs as you go down, right? As you go downstream, as the government gets closer to the people, the worse off scenario they're in. So that's why I'm saying we as professionals in the communities that we live in, that our businesses are built in, we need to be evangelists because they need the support. Public sector organizations need the support. K through 12, local government, your state government, we need to be supporting them as leaders in the industry and talking about how important cybersecurity and strengthening that posture is.
Yes. This next article I pulled in because I think this is a challenge for a lot of organizations as they start to build out their teams. This lays out some lessons learned from layoffs and things not to repeat. Because I think about what's going on right now in the economy, in the hiring side. There's a lot of dynamics going on. Yeah, I've got really good friends that are going to lose their job on December 1st. I mean, just crazy stuff that's going on right now. And I thought it would be really interesting to think about, when I hire, what mistakes do I need to avoid? And this article does, I think, a really interesting job of laying out some of those areas. Like, don't hire if you can't afford to keep them. Don't hire for the short term. Hire for the long term, right? Because if I hire them and then I lose the revenue or I lose the budget, then I'm going to, all that time and effort I spent to hire that person goes right out the window, completely gone.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah,
well,
that's why I've always been a big fan of I call it demand management, and it's workforce demand management, right? And it's really taking a look at the utilization of the team, whether it's through project or the support services side, and looking at that utilization of your team. And I've always been a fan that you don't want your team members 100% utilized. You want to make sure that you're carving out some of that time for training, professional development. Like you have to carve that out. So 75% utilization is healthy for me because now you have time for training and certifications and professional development and all of the trainings HR expects you to do. So looking at that demand management and hiring appropriately based on the pipeline of revenue coming into your organization, so you can afford them. There have been many times I've had to use the strategy of, you know what, I'm going to bring in a contractor until I have the pipeline to fulfill the FTE. Right. And then it could be contract to hire. It could be just, putting out a job description to hire an FTE after the fact. But go through that diligence of, number one, knowing that you need it from a utilization perspective. And then secondly, knowing you can afford it. And if those two don't align, then you got to build out a different strategy.
Jason, you brought up, I think, during the earlier discussion about like knowing the business, right? Really being aware and knowing the business. That's one of the first things you like to go in and do. If you don't do that, if you don't really understand the business and you're just focused on the tech and the security, you're going to walk into a room one day where somebody tells you, hey, lay off 20% of your team.
That's right.
Like you've got to know what the pulse and the health of the business is. So as you're forecasting and doing planning, you're aligned either to the growth or the reduction in capacity that's coming down the pipeline, right? I mean, that's just, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and show the value, right? So we talk about business enablement, and I've talked about this before with Matt. When I took over as CISO as the IT of an IT services organization and a managed services organization, I slowly realized, and this has been over the course of my career, that I've hated to be a cost center, but I slowly realized how I can start aligning security to the services industry, and I started tagging myself to every Salesforce opportunity that would come through the organization that my team influenced, right? Because in many instances, we couldn't sell a managed services contract or a professional services project without going through a vendor management team, a risk management team, a security team, actually talking to the CISO, right? So from there on, I'm like, wow, this is a business enabler because if we fail, they're going to say no to this contract. Vendor risk is going to chuck us. Or the CISO is going to say, not secure enough, right? We're not going to partner with you. So I realized quickly that, wait a minute, as my team engages with CISO, security teams, risk managers, vendor risk, business units of our customers, let's get tagged in an opportunity. And I mean, there were quarters that I'm looking at and I'm going, we influenced over $15 million of revenue. Right? I mean, think about that. Like I'm going, wow, that's, when it's a security team. Influencing
and that's switching into that enablement discussion, right? I mean, you've got to turn it around and make yourself known and aware, right? And highlight what your team's doing and the value they're adding. I totally agree with that.
Yep. You have to, in order to understand this, you have to understand how the business is run and measured and know what the metrics are to know what the future holds. Because if you don't, you're going to get blindsided, to your point, Ben, right? someday the CFO is going to walk into your office and goes, you got to eliminate 20% of your staff because we've got to get rid of the cost. And that is not
it's a lot, but it's a lot easier,
be.
Matt. It's a lot easier to have the conversation to say, I just drove 16 million in revenue this past quarter.
Right.
Why are you making me chop?
Right.
Yeah. Do you know what the impact to the business will be?
Compare the security organization to the other business units. How much revenue were they driving?
Yeah.
Right? That enables me and empowers me to have a strong conversation for the team now.
Absolutely. Oh, this next article, your most passionate employees may not be your top performers. You think? It's interesting research. It was interesting research. They compared calling employees versus job calling employees.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting breakdown, a research study. And at the end of the day, there was. I'm trying to find my little summary here. There was just a great line about managers should not get carried away by the current obsession with seeking higher purpose at work. Our findings suggest may create an unhealthy culture of employees signaling a sense of purpose they might not have, or it may not drive job-oriented workers away.
You know, just because someone feels like it was their calling to do something doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the most productive. I say this all the time. Growing up, I always thought my calling was I was going to be on stage with a guitar and a rock star. But guess what? I wasn't very productive at that because I sucked.
Yeah, I'm not sure how passionate translates to top performer, right? I mean, just because you enjoy doing it may mean, I think to your point, Jason, you're bad at it.
Yep.
Right?
That's it. I mean, I'm not on stage right now, am I? So I guess how good I was.
And you know, I took a project management course early in my career, and one of the comments was, you know, a feature that you add to the product that isn't in the MRD, like, should be a fireable offense. And I agree with that, right? Like, that's the problem if people are passionate. Like, they're just off doing stuff sometimes without direction or without, you know, alignment to strategy, right? They can get out in front of the skis. I think, you know, it's important to make sure everybody is aligned to where you're going, not where they want to go.
Right. And you know, want to know what, though? I look at that passion as a beneficial characteristic that if you see that as a leader, try to groom that. Try to you know, build that person up, because attitude and aptitude for me are the strongest things out there. You know, and if you have the attitude and aptitude, I'm willing to invest as a leader in you holistically all the time, because those are the two criteria that I look for. And being passionate to that level is one of those, right? You have that attitude. You have that attitude of success and passion around what you do. But it's one criteria. Then it's the aptitude to get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. Gartner identifies their top trends for the 2021 and 2022. No big surprises here. There's a couple things I do want to dig into, but I mean, look, remote and hybrid work is the new normal. We're all in it. Jason, I haven't seen you in studio and I can't remember how long. So
I know.
It is the new normal, unfortunately.
It's where we're at. It's where we're at. Yep.
This next one, though.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say this next one just bugs the crud out of me. Cybersecurity mesh architecture. So is that like a zero trust architecture? The way they describe this stuff just drives me nuts. We wonder why we get called out about all these different acronyms and all these different like terms, right? It's like, well, what is it? Is it zero trust? Is it XDR? Is it cybersecurity mesh architecture? Like, what the heck does all this stuff mean? These analysts create so much terminology.
Yeah, it makes me nuts.
It just drives me.
It makes me absolutely nuts. I mean, I looked at it. I looked at. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you know, how many times have you been in a meeting with another C-level exec or a person from the board, and they ask, like, how's our cybersecurity mesh architecture plan? And you're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, so then you have to read the article. I'm like, oh, you mean zero trust? Like, is that really what you're referencing? Like, it's hard to keep up with the terms people are creating. It seems like almost creating work.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when people come to me with the acronyms like zero trust networks and you know, building the cybersecurity mesh architecture, I always try to say, listen, let's take a step back. This is shit we should have been doing for the last 20 years. So let's go back and look at what the root of all this stuff is. And right now, we just have marketing teams bundling it very nicely and saying, here you go, consume it, right?
Yeah,
as the next strategy. But you want to know what? This is stuff we should have been doing for 20 years.
I think the interesting trends that came out of this for me is, okay, remote and hybrid work is the new normal. Okay, great. Security product consolidation, we talked about this in our discussion with Renee, is we're going to see some consolidation and integration and building platform architectures. Zero trust could be a foundation for that,
totally
that structure.
That. Sure.
Right? Completely there. And the other two that I pulled out, privacy enhancing computation. So think about this for a second. If I've got privacy embedded and I can make sure that from a computational side, I'm making sure privacy stick. I think that's interesting. And then the last one, boards are adding cybersecurity. Yeah, duh. I think we spent the first portion of this segment on it.
Yeah, I mean, I pulled out PEC as well because I'm interested in that, and I really want to take a deeper look at how you're performing computation while the data is still encrypted, right? I mean, I think that's awesome. Like I want to look into that. So. That's definitely the one I pulled out of there that I want to take a deeper look at. Everything else, table stakes.
Yeah,
stuff.
and that seemed to align to crypto to me, right? Like I'm not sure if they were trying to say crypto without saying crypto.
Yeah, maybe.
Interesting. Not where I took it, but possible. Last article: the 6 myths of zero trust. I mean, we kind of set this up all along the way. I thought this was a really interesting list because when you go through each of these, you're like, oh yeah, right? Like zero trust solves a technology problem. Well, does it?
Right, exactly.
Zero trust is a product or a set of products, is it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, it's a philosophy that we as security professionals have known about for 20 years. Now it's just modernized and marketized, and people are putting it together in platforms. So they're trying to put one big ecosystem around it. But at the end of the day, all of those sets of principles that they talk about is stuff that we've all had in our toolbox for the most part.
Right.
It seems like it really does come down to a rebranding exercise, and that just is a little frustrating.
It is, and that's why I think it's so important to point this stuff out, because you get enamored with the term zero trust, and you're like, oh, it's zero trust, and everybody has their own definition of zero trust and how it's done. I think the zero trust architecture document that NIST put together is the best way to think about how all these 5 components come together to secure your environment, and that's the way you need to think about this: people, process, and technology.
But when you
100%.
read that in this document, there's absolutely nothing that came out of that was an epiphany moment for me. It was, yeah, totally, we should be doing that.
Should be doing that.
We should have been doing that.
Right. Should have been doing that.
It's reinforcing the things we've always should have been doing.
Yes. Well, here we go. We just backtrack like 25 years in my career, and we just put a new name on it. Okay.
Yeah. New tag. It's
what's
a new tag.
old is new again.
Yes. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.